Hello folks, patch 1207 will be going live on the 16th of June for North America and the 17th for Europe, which makes this a great time to take a look at everything we can expect to get in the next minor content patch for midnight. This patch is subtitled Revelations and sees us pick up the story of Zul'Jin, brother to the Amani troll leader Zul'Jara. We last left Zul'Jin at the end of the Zul'Aman leveling storyline, being surprisingly upset by the restoration of the lore. And in the new patch, we'll be picking up his story again, with what will be the first chapter of the eventual patch 1210 storyline. Now, if you do follow the PTR news, you may have seen or heard the idea that this patch was going to have a 5-chapter storyline. But based on what we've seen in the PTR, we're now pretty certain that we're only going to be getting the first chapter of that story in this new patch, with the remaining 4 chapters most likely arriving with that 1210 patch. And that also means that we're likely not going to be visiting that mysterious land that's off the coast of Zul'Aman, as was speculated about early in the PTR testing cycle. But there are very strong indications that we will still eventually be going over there, again in that next major 1210 patch. And it is kind of unusual, but also very interesting that Blizzard really aren't keeping that destination a secret. It genuinely does seem to me that they want us to know in advance, and I do wonder where they're going with that. Now, one very important detail that I do want to call out is that we are going to have to wait a little longer to get our hands on this storyline, as it is not going to be going live with the patch. Instead, it will be launching on July the 7th in North America and July the 8th in Europe. This isn't the only new storyline that we can expect to get though, as we're also going to be getting a brand new Lorewaking story as well. If you've done previous Lorewaking episodes, this will be a very familiar format, with a mixture of revisiting existing questlines along with some brand new content. But there is one noticeable change, and that's our narrator, as Lorewalker Cho now has a brand new apprentice, Lily Stormstout, who has finally been allowed to grow up in-game. And I guess she has decided to take a break from her recent out-of-game exploits as a pirate. The story itself is appropriately enough focused on the troll lore, and we'll see us revisit the Zandalari troll lore storyline from BFA, which will be new to Alliance-only players, along with the Drukhari's troll story from Ras Zul'Farrak and Hakar the Soul Flayer, who goes all the way back to vanilla. And there's also going to be a brand new revelation about everyone's favourite lore, Bon Samedi, and completing the story will award you a brand new housing item, the Tome of Kings. And finally, on the story front, there's also a new side quest line, which will see us help Jan'alai's Loa Speaker hatch a clutch of Jan'alai's eggs. Now, I have seen some people compare this content to Dragonflight's Little Scales Daycare, but it is worth saying that this is just a one-off side quest line, with no dailies or anything like that to progress. But as with many of these bonus side quest lines we've had since the start of Dragonflight, it was still kind of fun to do. Moving beyond the new storylines, and the centerpiece content of the new patch is not 1 but 2 new zones. But these zones are ones that are going to be rather different to what we're used to up to now, especially for a 0.7 patch. If you played through to the end of Legion, you'll probably remember the Legion invasion point scenarios, which took us to a variety of different worlds which had fallen victim to the Legion. And in this new patch, we're going to be revisiting 2 of those worlds, the icy world of Val and the fungal swamp world of Nagtal. With the fall of the Legion, these 2 worlds have now fallen victim to the forces of the Void, so they're really not getting any kind of break at all. And it's going to be our job to deal with the outcome of that. Now, these zones are not simply just reusing the original Legion maps. Both of the zones have been significantly extended, especially Nagtal, which is now bigger than the Siren Isle was. And Val, while being a little bit smaller, does still have some additional indoor areas to visit. Gameplay wise, once you're in the zones, they do feel just like a mini open world zone, with quests, world quests, rares, treasures, and even a new world boss each. And yes, that does mean we're going to be getting 2 brand new world bosses in this patch. Just as in Legion, the bad news is that these zones are no-fly areas. And unlike the Siren Isle, there is no sign of flying getting unlocked later on. Now, honestly, the layout of Val is a bit cramped for flying, but Nagtal, which is much bigger, would have been perfectly fine to fly in. But I guess it would have been a bit weird to have one no-fly and one fly zone. So while I'm personally disappointed to be grounded, I'm not as salty as I normally would be in these situations. I will also say that unlike the Siren Isle, which really felt like it was designed to just be a weekly chore thing, these do have plenty of reasons to visit a lot more often. But entering these zones is going to feel quite a bit different to what we're used to, as it does involve going through this screen, which will be very familiar to anyone who does a lot of delves or ritual sites. And this does unfortunately create a very strong feeling that this isn't an open world area, but is instead an instance scenario content. And I'd actually go as far as to describe these zones as feeling a bit like a kind of hybrid zone and scenario. And this feeling is made even stronger by only one of the two zones being available at a time, which means that these zones will be rotating on a weekly basis, something that kinda reminded me of the BFA 8.3 N'Zoth Assault Zone content. A major part of the reason for that entry scheme existing though is the introduction of a new heroic world difficulty. Now, if you're familiar with Legion Remix's heroic world tier, this really isn't the same thing, as that higher difficulty is very much limited to just whichever of the two mini zones happens to be up that week. The entry screen does advise item level 274 as a minimum, and if you do try to enter with a lower item level, you'll get this pop-up, which will recommend going in as a group of 3. Now, neither of these requirements are enforced, so you can go in at a lower level solo if you really want to. That said, I did go in solo as an item level 279 tank, and while I didn't find the NPCs very hard to kill, I was taking an awful lot of damage on my tank, enough that I did have to pay a lot of attention to my defensive cooldowns and also some attention to my health, which is certainly not the norm for most open world content. And I do think that going in on a DPS character, especially one that doesn't have a lot of self-sustain, for example a mage, at anything less than the recommended item levels will probably give you a bit of a bad time. Or in other words, this is genuinely challenging unless you're a mythic gear tank, who as always will end up having the easiest time when it comes to soloing the content, and going in as a group will for sure give you a much better time of it no matter what item level your character is. Now, the rewards for the new zone are both kinda interesting and disappointing at the same time, as for the first time open world players are going to be able to get myth track gear. Albeit, there is a major catch with this. Obtaining one myth track gear item will require defeating the world bosses on hero difficulty 4 times. It is character specific, or in other words, you'll only be able to get one myth piece every 4 weeks. And if we assume that this patch will last the usual 8 weeks, then this means you're only going to get 2 myth pieces out of it. And those myth pieces will be drawn from a very limited choice of back, bracers or waist, which is hardly the most exciting slots. On top of that, both of the difficulties will, as usual, be giving us a raft of new cosmetic rewards, including 3 new mounts. These mounts are going to be sold on the new patch vendor, but unlocking them is going to require doing a few mini-metas. Each of the 2 new zones has their own mini-meta. Nagtal's is a trip through the stars, which will award you the Netherforge null frame, and Val's is a trip around the stars, giving you the Void Mancer Starcarver. And the third mini-meta achievement will be for Heroic World difficulty, with Heroic Showdowns awarding you the Netherforge null frame. Now, it is worth calling out that the first 2 meta achievements do include some time-gated side storylines, and it's currently looking quite likely that it could take you up to 6 weeks to complete them. Beyond that, there is a brace of Lightforge housing items, and plenty of new transmogs, which will require a mixture of Voidlight Mal and Field Accolades, which are being retained as the new mini-patch currency. And if you become bored turning in all of those dark particles for Field Accolades, you will now have something that you can spend them on directly, with the arrival of brand new pouches which can award you some weapon appearances. These appearances already can drop from the field pouches that you get from doing void assaults, but the drop rate from those pouches is frankly terrible. I don't recall even seeing one drop so far. So you'll be glad to know that these brand new pouches now guarantee that you get one item every time, so they will end up being a much better source of these transmogs, and I do strongly suggest that you start to hoard your dark particles now. Unfortunately, these pouches do not have dupe protection, so you can potentially get multiple of the same appearance, but at least they are bind on equip, so you will be able to put them up in the auction house and hopefully get your hands on some extra gold. Now, taking a bit of a step back for a moment, and I have some mixed feelings about these new zones. On one hand, I do like to revisit older zones for an update, but on the other hand, I'm not a fan of the prevalence of patch zones which are disconnected from the rest of the expansion contents and which require going through a loading screen in order to access, as it does serve to make the open World of Warcraft feel a lot less connected than it otherwise would be. That said, these are of course on different planets, so it is kinda necessary to have a loading screen at some point, but I would have liked to have seen the dev team try something a little bit different, for example using the Vindicar as a travel system. And given the player feedback about patch 12.05 having a bit too much to do of all things, and maybe even feeling a bit overwhelming for some players, I do see a lot of value in having that weekly rotation to make the content a bit more manageable for us all. And honestly, that type of weekly rotation did work quite well back in BFA 8.3.0. Players have been asking for a harder version of the open world for quite a while now, and offering selectable difficulty is a good way to do it, as it means that those of us who prefer the world as it is get our version as well. And I do think that these zones are a good way for the dev team to test out that heroic world tier difficulty. That said, I am not convinced that having just 2 myth track items will feel exciting enough to justify that harder difficulty, especially for marginally geared solo players on less robust classes like mages or priests. Now, it is important to say that this could still be updated before launch, and I do hope that it is, as I have a feeling that there could be some pushback from the player base unless the rewards are significantly buffed. Personally, I would like to see the myth track drops be doubled to 1 every 2 weeks, and have them offer a choice of catalyzable tier slot items. Crafted gear cannot be catalyzed, meaning that players who rely on delves for gearing are limited in the slots that they can put their best gear into, and having this content drop items to fill those gaps, I think could be very appealing. My main concern is that any pushback could result in some panic nerfs to the content, or otherwise low engagement over time, both of which might result in the dev team learning the wrong lessons about what players want from a harder open world difficulty. Speaking for myself as a protection paladin main who is item level 289 on live, this content really isn't going to give me any trouble at all, but at the same time, the only reason I can see for accessing the heroic world tier at all is to get my hands on that mount achievement, after which I think I'd probably end up sticking to the normal difficulty. Now, if you're not a fan of the open world content, there is still some other content that is for you. As teased in the 2026 roadmap, we are getting a brand new mini raid called Sporefall. This sees us take on Rotmire in a brand new 1 boss encounter, which will award gear that's 9 item levels higher than currently fully upgrade items of the same tier. And if you're in a heroic raid team who is unable to transition to mythic due to that fixed 20-man requirement, that is being relaxed for this mini raid, with Mythic Sporefall flexing between 15 and 20 man sizes on Mythic difficulty. Officially, that is currently a one-off thing, though I do suspect that this is Blizzard experimenting with the idea of Mythic Flex, with a view to figuring out if and how they could make it work more widely in the future. Reward-wise, the new raid will be dropping gear that is 9 item levels higher than fully upgraded gear of the difficulty tier. And there is also a new mount, the Luminous Spore Glider, which requires defeating the boss in 4 different weeks on any difficulty. As well as those major new content additions, we're also going to be getting a new addition to our character power progression, with the addition of the Omnium Folio. This will essentially be filling exactly the same space as things like the Onyx Annulet or Sussy Circlet did, as a late season borrowed power system, but it is one that is going to be quite a bit different to what we're used to up to now. Instead of getting a new item which will lock out one of our gear slots, this is basically a tech upgrade console, very similar to the one that we've had all along in the Void Storm. You will unlock this by doing a short quest line, which will end with awarding you your very first upgrade, offering a choice between being able to shoot out void orbs or fire pillars, which both do damage to our enemies and heal our allies. The full tree has 5 levels, and it looks like we'll be unlocking them on a weekly basis via a series of weekly quest lines, which can be summed up as just doing some basic patch content. For week 2, we'll be asked to do a ritual site, and this will give us a choice of either 2 defensive options or a speed buff. On week 3, we're asked to do 5 void assaults, and that will extend the duration of that first week effect. Week 4's is to complete a delve, dungeon, or defeat a raid boss, and that will give us a stacking secondary stat buff of our choice. And the final week 5 is to defeat one of the brand new world bosses, which will award us a doubling of the week 1 effects damage output. Now, looking at all of these, I personally think that week 3 Void Assault will be the only one that will cause us any annoyance at all, as overall they are going to be quite easy and quick to get, which is just as well, as at least based on the testing on the PTR, these effects are passive and aren't all that exciting. Now, one very obvious question is, how long are these additional effects going to be staying around? And the answer to that was hidden away on a preview post by Blizzard that they issued just last week. And it was one that was a little bit of a surprise to me, as Blizzard had this to say: these rune powers will be available to players throughout the rest of the Midnight expansion. So there you have it. This looks like it's going to end up being an expansion-wide borrowed power system, which does obviously raise another question. Could we see this getting extended every season, perhaps in those 0.7 patches? But with this Omnium Folio being located in Silvermoon, I kinda suspect it will turn out to be the case. Overall for me, as my main is pretty close to being maxed out gear-wise, I don't dislike the idea of having something unobtrusive like this to life extend my power progression. And if you're still working on those Season 1 goals, this might just be what you need to push you over the edge. I also like that this new system isn't locking out any gear slots, and being able to keep it for the rest of the expansion is going to avoid the kind of issues that we saw with the items from the War Within, which had a tendency to hang around like a bad smell, especially in some classes, until they eventually get nerfed. My only qualm about it all is, do we really need this system? And I have a feeling the answer to that is going to depend on your playstyle. Ritual sites are getting a bit of a buff with the introduction of a 6th difficulty level. This will require taking on 6 challenges and will award you 5 myth track crests every run, which means that if you're a Delver or a solo player who's been losing out on being able to craft top rank gear, you will now be able to farm out as many myth track crests as you want. And this is something that I think which will appeal to a lot of players of alts as well. There are also some improvements to the ritual sites and Void Assault's gear rewards as well, as the heroic gear chests are now going to be available on a per slot basis. And there's also the addition of a brand new Warbound until equipped chest which will offer champion gear, albeit that chest is still fully RNG. And for alts fans, Turbulent Timeways is making a return, running from June the 30th through to August the 11th. And this is also going to see the arrival of Dragonflight Timewalking. Yes, it really is time for that to be launched. Dragonflight Time Walking is going to include Algathar Academy, Halls of Infusion, Niltharis, Ruby Life Pools, the Azure Vault and Brackenhide Hollow. And as always, there's going to be a brand new vendor, which will be offering 2 new mounts, the Liquid Hot Magma Slug and the Black Fur Backer. And along with that, there are some new customizations for the old Dragonflight customizable mounts. And an interesting new toy, the Photo Finisher, which upon defeating a boss will summon a little dragon who will take a screenshot of your triumph. And as is usual, Turbulent Timeways is coming with its own brand new mount, the Spawn of Viranoth, which is a pretty cool looking proto-Drake model. As always, getting that mount will require hitting Master of Timeways for 4 weeks of the event. To get Master of Timeways, you just need to do 4 time walking dungeons without letting the Turbulent Timeways XP buff, which lasts for 2 hours, drop off between runs. Now, you may have heard that this time around, the XP buff for Turbulent Timeways is going to be account-wide. The bad news is that Blizzard have recently updated their preview for the event to confirm that this is not the case. The buff is still going to be a per character buff only. For fans of player housing, we're getting an increase in the exterior decor limits, up to 300 for level 5 and 350 for level 7. And if you've been sad that the limited ability to place lights outside was recently removed, this is back with a vengeance, with a significant increase in the amount of supported lighted items, albeit with some restrictions on how closely you can place them together. Those restrictions most likely are a compromise which is needed to enable us to have a lot more lighting in our plots. There's also over 100 new basic decor items added to the neighbourhood vendors, giving us a bunch of new options to play with. Sadly though, there's no new housing levels or any increases in our interior budgets so far. User interface wise, the personal resource display is getting a mini makeover with a lot of new customization options and the ability to hide particular bars or even to change your health bar to your class colour. I just wish they would do that option for the main player unit frame as well. There are also some tweaks to the damage meter, including an option to only have it show when you're in a group. And there are some improvements to tank threat display for player nameplates, and a much better tooltip for your raid vault rows. And for leveling players, along with that Turbulent Timeways, there's also some very major buffs to XP for certain quests, including those Delver's Call quests, dungeon quests, but also the weekly renown activities, which are getting some quite massive buffs. And if you're a keen mount collector who's run into a very annoying bug when trying to collect all of the moths in Harandar, if you know you know, then there is some light at the end of the tunnel for you, as Blizzard have completely reworked that feature to now be quest based instead of relying on collecting those moths. And this is a change which Blizzard does promise is going to fix any issues you've been having with missing moths or missing mount. And Blizzard did promise that this will fix all of your issues with missing moths, so let's hope it does. There are also some holiday event updates, including a brand new micro holiday. The Darkspear Dash will start on June the 27th, and this event will see the Darkspear and Zandalari trolls race from the Echo Isles all the way to Silver Moon. We don't have a whole lot of details about this event, but I would expect it to be very similar to the Great Gnomnagon run that takes place in November. Most micro holidays are very quick to do, taking at most 15 minutes, but they generally only offer temporary rewards like cosmetic buffs, or sometimes, as was the case with the Gnomnagon run, they award no rewards at all. Also on the holiday update agenda are some updates to the Midsummer Fire Festival. The WoW devs generally don't share any advanced information on major holiday changes, but we have data mined a brand new mount, the Sun Festival's Painted Rock, which looks like it will drop from the event's mini dungeon boss Ahun. Along with that, there are some new Sunwalker Tauren themed transmog sets, likely available from the event vendors, and some new Tauren and Dwarf NPCs, which may be hinting at some new upcoming content. My guess is that this will be to add some new bonfires in the midnight zones, but you never know, this could just perhaps be a sign of something bigger to come. I guess we'll just need to wait and see. And finally, I also have a couple of quality of life additions. If you're someone who has been working on getting your epic crafting gear, or maybe have been avoiding it and are a bit burned out after running 8 abundance events every week for so long, there is going to be some relief for you. In the new patch, you will have the opportunity to spend up to all 8 shards of Dun in a single run, which will net you 8 times the reward, allowing you to get away with doing just 1 per week. And if you've been struggling with repair costs currently in the PTR, our weapons are no longer taking any damage in combat, though they do still lose durability when we die. This isn't a massive saving, but it will still add up over time. And that's it for patch 12.07 content. Now on paper, this does sound like another very jam-packed patch, which with a lot of that content being one-off stuff, I really don't think that it is going to feel quite as busy as the 0.5 patch did. Realistically, the only main repeatable content are those 2 new zones and the new raid, and these I think do serve some very different audiences, and hopefully that is going to translate into a smoother release for this patch, something that is very much needed, I think. So that's it for my preview of the new patch. As always, I would love to hear all of your thoughts about the new content. What are you most looking forward to, and what are you going to be giving a miss? Comment down below. If you found this update helpful, entertaining, or even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos, along with my other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My links are in the description below as well. I've also started streaming in Twitch on Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays, and you can find a link to my channel below, and I hope you'll be able to join me on my journey of exploration through midnight. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.